Thank you. I didn't, so used to it not working. No, nothing personal there, Marcus. Okay, I got my speaker shut off. There's too much technology here. It feels like I'm trying to plant wheat with all that technology. Okay, first thing up is approval of the minutes from the last week. Is anybody going to make it? Representative Gardner makes a motion to accept the minutes. Is there a second? Representative Schreiber is a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Oh, did I hear somebody? Did you say something, Annie?
Aye. I
Okay.
voted aye.
We need to have little hands waving on the screen, you know, so we'll get this all down. That'd be pretty handy. Okay, all those in favor say aye. So we did that, all right? All those opposed say no. Minutes carried. Okay, we're going to go to action on previous bills heard. HB 2329, updating the entities who are subject to the pipeline safety program of the State of Kansas Corporation Commission and increasing the maximum penalties and fines that may be imposed for safety violations to conform with the federal regulations. Nick, are you online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am. You want me to go over that real fast? You did a good job yourself.
No. I'd like to have you do it. I get tongue-tied.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Committee, House Bill 2329 relates to the pipeline safety and the rules and regulations and penalties that can be assessed for those violations. So current statute in 66-150 authorizes the KCC to adopt rules and regulations to conform with the Federal Natural Gas Pipeline Safety Act. This statute also provides who is subject to those rules and regulations and who's subject to that act under Kansas law. What this bill would do is it add that all operators of gathering lines as defined in federal regulation 49 CFR 191.3 would be subject to the KCC's pipeline safety regulations. Additionally, this bill would remove the provision that excludes from regulation pipeline operators that provide natural gas service directly to the ultimate consumer if it is for farming and activities related to oil and gas production. Additionally, the section 2 of the bill increases the maximum civil penalties that the KCC could assess for pipeline safety violations. And committee, I believe you were all emailed a proposed balloon amendment relating to this section 2 with the maximum civil penalties. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Anybody have any questions for Nick? Seeing none, are there any amendments to this bill? Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to offer the amendment that Nick was just explaining, where the major part of that amendment is to strike section 2, which deals with the civil penalties.
Are you offering that amendment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Move that amendment.
Is there a motion to amend HB 2329?
I move to make the amendment, yeah.
Any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, you may close. Oh, Representative, seconded, okay. Seconded by Representative Mason. All those in favor, before we do that, is there any discussion on the amendment? Who's that?
I just was going to say we need to do a little discussion, I think.
Oh, go ahead if you got something. You got some questions?
No, I don't know. I thought you were closing, Mr. Chairman, so I wanted to make sure we had a little bit of discussion before we made that move.
Yeah. I don't have
Thank
my
you.
little to-go sheet. I'm trying to do this off memory.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm trying to get everybody up here too. Okay, so yeah. Thank you. If you got the amendment explained, is there questions? Is there a move to move the amendment? I think we did. Any discussion? You may close.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I do have some discussion. I apologize.
I'm sorry. Who's talking? Oh, Representative Carmichael, of course. Good morning, Mr. Carmichael.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. It's always a pleasure to see you on this beautiful morning. If I might inquire of the maker of the amendment, could you explain to us what the amendment does and why it is necessary and what it is that you attempt to accomplish by means of your amendment? Thank you.
I might be able to answer that. Representative Schreiber, would you like to answer that?
Sure. So what the amendment does is, the main part of it is strike section 2, which in the original bill, it raised those civil penalties from $25,000 to $200,000 for each violation for each day, and then for a maximum civil penalty for a related series of violations up to $2 million. So after consulting with the KCC, they felt they would forego those increased penalties, and that it was more important for the gathering lines that are kind of the peanut of the bill itself to include those within the pipeline safety program and not increase the penalties that were originally outlined in the bill.
Mr. Chairman, if I might ask one more question, please.
Exactly, you perfectly can.
Thank you very much. Representative Shriver, I understood from the title of this bill that part of the reason we needed the legislation was to conform to federal regulations and laws that apparently have changed in some fashion. I take it that the civil penalties provisions of the bill, which are being taken out by the amendment, in other words, we're retaining the current scheme, that there's no need to have conformity with any changes in federal law or regulation. Would that be a fair assumption on my part?
If I understood correctly, the volume's a little low in here, but I wouldn't say that there's no need for any conformity with federal regulations. I think that's the point of including gathering lines.
Yeah,
So that
let
they fall
me
under.
try to speak up, and I apologize. I'm in a gentle, soft, easy mood this morning, Mr. Chairman, but I'll talk a little bit louder. Part of what this bill was about was to conform with federal laws or regulations. And I just want to make sure that by this amendment, we are not eliminating any of the conformity that was part of the major purpose or requirement for conformity. It was part of the major purpose of the bill in the first instance.
Okay, now I understand. Thank you. No, as it doesn't forego that conformity with including those gathering line, including the additional natural gas structures for federal law.
Well, I appreciate your help. It sounds like a fine idea to me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any other questions on the amendment? Seeing none, you may close.
I close.
All those in favor of passing HB 2329 as amended, say aye. All those opposed, same sign. Anybody
You
want
have
their
to vote on the
motion?
amendment first.
Oh, okay,
Sorry.
that's okay. I haven't had enough coffee yet this morning. Excuse me. Amendment passes. Any other amendments? Seeing none. All those in favor of passing HB 2329 out favorably as amended?
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Anybody want their vote recorded?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Carmichael asks that his affirmative vote be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Thank you.
Can you please talk up a little bit, sir?
Mr. Chairman,
I can't throw the
Representative
gavel at you
Carmichael
today, so-
requests that his affirmative vote be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you get that, Barbara? Anybody else? Seeing none, I guess HB 2329 has moved out favorably for passage. Thank you. Next order of business is Senate Bill 24. Nick, would you care to give us an explanation of Senate Bill 24 prohibiting municipalities from imposing restrictions on customers for use of energy-based services upon source of energy?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill 24, probably in pretty recent memory with this week's hearing, would establish a new law that would prohibit municipalities from imposing any ordinance, resolution, code, rule, provision, standard, permit, plan, or any other binding action that prohibits, discriminates against, restricts, limits, impairs, or has the effect thereof an in-use customer's use of retail natural gas service. This would not prohibit a municipality from limiting its own use of retail natural gas service as an end-use customer. And And the bill would be known as inside as the Kansas Energy Choice Act and would take effect upon publication in the Kansas Register. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the reviser? Seeing none. Are there any amendments to this bill?
Mr. Chair,
Representative Berkowitz.
I'm carrying an amendment, and I believe Nick has the amendment beginning with the unreasonably balloon. If you would explain that, and is that available to the committee?
Nick, would you care to respond?
Give me just a sec, committee and Mr. Chair, and I will email that to Barbara to be distributed. And I will put it up on my screen here in just a second.
Thank you, sir.
It's up on the screen. Okay, would you care to explain it now?
Yes, Nick, if you would do the explanation, please.
Nick, did you hear that by chance?
Yes, let me make sure. Let me get it shared. And I was having trouble unmuting myself with my screen sharing.
All right.
Okay. Committee, this amendment would, I think you heard about it in some testimony on Tuesday. This would change the language. A municipality would still not be able to impose any ordinance, resolution, code, or any other binding action that prohibits or unreasonably discriminates against, restricts, limits, or impairs. And this would strike that language or has the effect thereof. And so it's all about the or unreasonably discriminates against, restricts, limits, or impairs an in-use customer's use of a public utility service. Additionally, this amendment would provide that a municipality, and this section would not be construed to prohibit a municipality from setting new performance standards for efficiency and safety relating to energy use in new or existing buildings. And I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Any questions for Nick? Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully you can hear me, Nick. Where you talked about the efficiency standards, is there any limits, or is it whatever the city municipality determines to put out?
So you can see the language of the amendment, and it's would be setting new and updated performance standards relating to energy use in new or existing buildings.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question? Representative Mason.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on that, these would not be objective standards. These would just be subjective. Nick?
I don't know that I can, I don't know that I have much to add to that. I think building performance standards, there's some objective standards that would be used, but I don't have much to add between subjective and objective on that point.
Did that answer your question? Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Turner? Oh, Representative Keither? Representative Keither, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, my machine's going a little crazy here. I think, Nick, do we have, what an unreasonably, standard is in any definition anywhere?
Can you please speak up? I'm having a real hard time hearing you, please.
I'm addressing the first part, the word unreasonably. Is that defined, what that means anywhere? In
Nick, can you
statute?
answer that?
No, this balloon and this bill does not define unreasonably, though unreasonably would come with some legal significance there as to the term unreasonably discriminates against. It sets a little higher standard over the just discriminates against the discrimination or the restriction or the limitation or the impairment would need to be unreasonable in order to be prohibited.
Okay, that's helpful. And the second part of the amendment, it seems to me that if that gets put on, then it sort of undoes the need for the bill, sort of how I see it. So just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
that second part of the bill, the only thing I can add to that is just it's relating to efficiency and safety. And so the performance standards would be relating to efficiency and safety.
Well, but there's also, oh gosh, my phone's ringing now. I mean, everything's going off the rails. Every city has codes, so they're all new builds are all gonna have to be meeting those codes. So I'm a little lost as to why, if we're gonna pass the bill, why we would need that language. If we're gonna not pass the bill. I mean, I just don't see the need for the language. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Gartner.
You have one, Representative Turner. Why don't you go ahead first?
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, she did kind of raise the same questions I was going to raise. One of them is we're imposing this new standard of reasonableness on language that's fairly clear cut in terms that it can't limit, discriminate, or impair. And now there's this reasonableness standard that brings in a blurry picture to one that was fairly clear. And then secondly, the bill seems to be about the options of fuel sources. And the new language down here seems to be bringing in a new topic of performance standards, which I don't see anything in the bill as it sits limiting that. The Amendment C that was added in the Senate basically says that this doesn't apply. The city has opportunity to do what it wants with its own city buildings. So it seems the language is pretty clear as is without the amendment. But thank you.
Thank you. Representative Gartner.
Well, I think, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Representative Turner and Representative Keither have already pointed it out. It's confusing when you look at B and it talks about standards. And then in section C, with the amendment, it says set new performance standards. So I don't know. In one paragraph, it says shall not impose, and then we correct it with the amendment. It's very, very confusing to me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's why we're here to discuss it. Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that language concerns me because it seems so vague. You know, a city or a municipality could set new performance standards, and that could be an end run to preclude a specific type of energy source. I think it needs to be an objective standard. It's kind of like when I applied for to Abercrombie and Fitch to be a catalog model, and they said I wasn't. They said I wasn't pretty enough. I mean, who's really to say? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is that a voice vote or is show of hands? Okay, Representative Delperdang.
How am I supposed to follow that one?
It's a closing act.
I'm looking at the amendment, the bubble there, and it talks about for efficiency, safety as it relates to use in new or existing buildings, but it's the efficiency one. To me, you look at the bubble and it just looks like it's really a simple laid out amendment. But then you stop and think with that one word of the efficiency, and I'm thinking any energy source producing an exhaust, an energy source that produces an exhaust of any source by the laws of science must be less than 100% efficient. So again, is this just another ploy to eliminate natural gas or any other fossil fuel that's used? Secondly, it looks good on the surface, but what energy sources are being deployed to provide such efficiencies? And I've got a printout this morning of the Southwest Power Pool, and it's popping out at about 14% natural gas. It's got some diesel, it's got 27% roughly on the coal working out there. So upstream, you've got power coming from fossil fuel sources from the Southwest Power Pool that must be taken in consideration with the amendment. So are you effectively burning coal and burning gas behind the scenes just to produce electricity to satisfy people's perceived values on the front side? So I've got a real problem with this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to speak up, but if for some reason I can't be heard, just let me know. First, with respect to the comments of Representative Mason, I want it clearly understood, Representative, that not only are you not pretty, you're just flat out ugly, as a matter of fact. So I want to make my position abundantly clear to the committee in that regard. I'm not too handsome myself. Now, to address the amendment, this bill is important legislation. Natural gas production in Kansas is a significant part of the oil and gas industry that brings millions, if not billions, of dollars into this state and provides jobs for thousands of Kansans. Natural gas is undoubtedly the cleanest form of so-called non-renewable energy, cleanest form of energy that is a fossil-based fuel. It's what saved our bacon during the recent cold weather catastrophe. It's important to our state, it's important to our comfort, it's important to our safety, it's important to our security. The purpose of the bill is to prevent cities from trying to close down the natural gas industry in Kansas. And that's a laudable and a good purpose. But this amendment, which not surprisingly is supported by the Kansas League of Municipalities, takes away all of the good purpose of this bill. It says, notwithstanding the fact that you can't restrict or prohibit the use of natural gas, you just have to come up with a different made-up reason to do it. And so if we put this amendment on this bill, we might as well just throw the bill in the trash can and tell the natural gas industry that we don't want you here in Kansas because we're a bunch of greenies. So I urge my friends not to adopt this amendment, because if you do, you might as well vote against the bill and just be honest about what you're doing. And I apologize to my handsome friend, Representative Mason. My words were ill-advised. You are a very pretty man, Representative, and I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Carmichael, and would the handsome man in the committee that you're referring to like to respond to that, or not all of you talk at once?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just too busy blushing right now to be able to respond.
Okay, thank you. Representative Berkowitz.
It's nice to know that all of our words are on the record. Yeah, that's great. My concern with the amendment that I'm carrying, I've carried it for the sake of argument and discussion. I think we got good discussion, is the two ambiguous portions, and that's the unreasonable and the efficiency and safety, because there's no way to measure the word efficiency, especially, other than that does it do anything to the environment? Well, yes, natural gas does. Or unreasonable discrimination. In today's society, the two words unreasonably discriminate don't even work together. To me, discriminate is discriminate. And so to discriminate against something is not inherently wrong, but it should at least be put to suspect. So I feel like that this doesn't do what, I know that there was good intent, some good intent behind it, but I believe that it damages this bill, and I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Annie, I noticed you had your hand up and it went off, or I don't want to bypass you. Did you have a question?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we could just withdraw the amendment and not even vote on it, if the maker of the amendment would like to do that.
I can do that. I withdraw my amendment.
Any questions? Seeing none. Might have to ask a question to the revisers. Do we have to vote on that withdrawal, or just, is that it then? Just so we make sure the record's straight.
Nick?
I believe as long as the maker of the one who proposed the amendment, and if there was a second, is agreeable to that, it's just fine procedurally.
Right. I think it was good to help discussion, and I withdraw my amendment.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Is there any amendments? Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment also. Nick, I can explain it, but if you'd bring it up on the video for everybody, and then I've got someone passing the paperwork out here in the committee room. But while it's being passed out, the amendment just is to bring up a few things I've been kind of researching on it. There was a bulletin that came out from the Atomic Sciences Institute a while back, and it talked about wind turbines. And a typical 1 megawatt wind turbine has typically 3 blades, as everybody knows, but each turbine also contains 1,800 pounds of neodymium and 130 pounds of dysprosium. According to the Institute of Analysis on Global Security, each turbine produces, because of that, approximately 1 ton of radioactive waste. Furthermore, about 6 million pounds of waste is created annually through wind turbine blade maintenance and replacements. 1 ton of waste is equal to about 12,000 cubic meters of physical waste, which contains hydrofluoric acid, sulfuric dioxide, sulfuric acid, and acidic water. I think it's time we have an open accountability of the waste being generated by our green energy and what is happening to these blades that are ultimately cut up and buried in the ground in contact with the groundwater sources. So this amendment just addresses that, and it makes it requiring it to be public as far as what is being actually used in the energy downstream. With that, I'd stand for questions.
Any questions?
Yes, Mr.
Did I hear any?
Yes, you did. Thank you,
Representative
Mr.
Keither.
Chairman. First of all, I would challenge the germane that's really of putting this on this bill. But I'd like to point out that this is a perfect example, as is the base bill, of why an energy task force would be a wonderful thing to have, because these are clearly things that we need to be discussing and having everybody at the table to do so. I understand the amendment and I don't necessarily dislike the message. I mean, we all need to be talking about all of these aspects of our resources. But I don't believe it belongs in this bill, so I'm not going to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Annie. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'm not certain that we have a second for the amendment. If we do, I did not hear it.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
He wants a second.
I'm inquiring if we had a second for this amendment, because if we do, I did not hear it.
Okay, is there a second? Would you like to second it? Representative Berkowitz, second.
Thank you. Now, to the amendment. My friend, the representative from Wichita, who is not a pretty man at all, it's well-meaning, I'm sure. And I take him at his word that the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists raises concern about radioactive materials that are used. I think it's perhaps even in the coating of the blades, but I'm not certain. And it's something that we need to look at, not just on a scale in Kansas, but it's something that needs to be looked at not only nationally, but also internationally. This may be a good idea. It might be necessary. But this is far, far too important a decision to make based upon a description of one article in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. For example, if this were a bill and if we were having a hearing on it, I'm sure that the folks from our investor-owned, vertically integrated electric utility, Elliott Management Evergy, I think it's soon to be called, would come to us and explain what's going on. We would have the experts here to talk about what's on the blades or in the turbine, what the consequences are, why it's there, how this interacts with the deposits, the escrow that they have to place in order to build the towers in the first place, what arrangements are being made for recycling or reclamation of the radioactive materials, but we don't know any of those things. And so while this might be a good idea, and I might support it, I can't support it based upon my good friend's description of an article in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. So I will have to vote no on the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Carmichael. Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was trying to find out what neodymium is and dysprosium. You know, I spent a lot of time in the nuclear field and I'd never come across those elements. So I did find things on neodymium, and basically what it talks about is that its primary use is in high-strength magnets for generators and so forth. So in this way, it's talking about the waste generated from wind turbines, but not with any other electrical generators that we have, coal, natural gas, that you know, turn and need the magnets to produce the electricity, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I agree with the other speakers prior to me that there's a lot more information I think that's needed on this amendment before I could support it. And I'll just make one other final comment as far as radioactive materials. It's sometimes used to scare people, and I understand that. But also, there's radioactivity around us all the time. Bananas, the potassium in bananas is radioactive as well, but it's not in really high concentrations or strength that harms people. Flying in airplanes, also in jet airliners, you get exposed to radiation and so forth. So just because something's radioactive doesn't mean it's necessarily a hazard to a person's life. It just depends on what type it is and how strong it is. So I'll just add those comments. So thank you.
Is that why they throw that lead tarp over you when you do an x-ray of your teeth?
That's why I look the way I do.
Representative Carmichael for a second time.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I left my hand up. But if you really want me to continue to talk about the amendment, I'm of course happy to do so.
Well, actually, the first time I was just calling you because I thought you would have your hand up, and then it was a hidden deal. But anyway, a little comedy here. All right, any other questions? Representative Turner.
Yes, I have, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. So as I backpedal to the start of this thing, so this is an act about municipalities not limiting the fuel source choices of the folks that live in the city. Okay, that's where we start. And then Section C was added to make sure, and this, as it came out of the Senate, it was added to make sure that it wasn't construed that this limits the city from fuel choice sources of their own city buildings, correct? So now we move to the amendment, and the amendment is basically, number one says they should provide full disclosure of energy sources used in the community. So what do you mean by community? The entire community, their buildings? I'm not clear on that first point. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, but
Yes.
I guess what I'm trying to bring up is while communities, people, et cetera, might think, gee, we're just using pure efficient electricity, there's a back-end cost to this. There's a back-end process. It's something I and the representative that was talking earlier, who happens to drive a electric vehicle, we joke about, and I consider him a good friend, but we joke about that he's actually driving a coal-powered vehicle. And in reality, that it's there. So there's a back-end cost that I'm just trying to point out here. It's not pure efficiency in all electrical type of an environment, even though that's what you might see on the end.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do have additional inquiry.
Okay, is this a real one again, or is this a fake hand?
Now, this is real. I'm genuinely here. Actually, two things that I need to address. First, with respect to my good friend, Representative Deplerdane's remarks about my over 100,000 mile coal-powered vehicle. I am relieved to know that once Elliott Management Evergy sequesters those old coal assets and closes them down at the ratepayer's expense, that my vehicle will probably be about 70% renewable fueled and maybe 8% nuclear fueled. So I look forward to another 100,000 miles on that car, hopefully not powered by coal. That being said, I have an inquiry of the reviser with the chair's permission. I think there's a constitutional requirement that the title of a bill reflect its contents, and I don't remember the exact words or requirement of our Constitution. But if we were to now add to this bill, as this amendment proposes, wind energy, radioactivity, radioactive waste, turbine blade maintenance, I don't see anything in the title or in the balloon amendment that would point that out to the public so they would know that this is more than just something relating to natural gas utility service. Could I inquire as to how it is that the title, if the bill were to be amended, still fits?
Certainly, Representative Carmichael, and yes, you do raise a good constitutional point. And should the committee choose to go forward with this amendment, I would ask the committee to grant leeway to amend the title to put something in the title regarding requiring municipalities to provide disclosure of certain wastes and certain items, something along those lines. But yes, we would need to probably amend the title.
And Mr. Chairman, I don't think this amendment's going to pass, but if it does, I certainly have no objection to giving the reviser Scrivener's license to make the necessary changes to conform the title to the constitutional requirement. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Kelsler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually would not mind having this discussion. I'm just not convinced it really belongs in this bill. But I think this discussion actually is probably one that we should have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so assuming that we will be voting on this, I guess that is my question, is how does the representative construe that language? So in other words, the city would be obligated to do what? To provide full disclosure of energy sources used in the community. Does that mean the city limits? I'm not sure what the community means in the usage here. Thank you.
Or I'm trying to see how the original bill is worded because it's the municipality or, well, it talks about municipality means county, city, township, other political tax or taxing subdivisions thereof. So, and it's just, what I'm trying to do is just force the transparency out there. If you're going to perceive going to a more efficient energy source, you need to be transparent with what is behind that energy source.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Representative Demperdank, you can close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for hearing my amendment. With that said, I want you to know I think the bill is good as it stands and should be kept clean as it moves forward to the House floor. Therefore, I withdraw my amendment. But I do ask everyone consider the information we provided for future green technologies. It's not always what you think. Thank you.
Thank you. Withdraw your second, okay. I don't believe we need to make any action on a withdrawal, so we'll move on. Are there any other amendments? You have an amendment? Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to feel left out here. Mine's a little bit less controversial than the last previous two, but can you go ahead and pull that up and distribute that out?
Nick, would you be able to explain the amendment?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Let me get an email to Barbara real fast. So committee, what this amendment does is it would define utility service under the bill. Currently, the bill relates to the provision of natural gas service, and this would apply to propane as well with the amendment.
Any questions for the reviser? Seeing none. Do I have a second for this amendment for Representative Mason? Second. All those in favor? Okay.
Discussion,
Any
please.
discussion on the, well, got to approve the bill amendment first. Is there any discussion on the amendment?
Now I'm out of the meeting. No, you're out.
I couldn't hear you. Was you wanting to speak to the amendment, Representative Keither?
Well, Mr. Chair, could he explain why he's bringing it, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely. I don't want to leave our friends out over there on that side as well.
Any other discussion on this? Representative Kessler, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I close.
All those in favor of passing out as amended, Representative Kelsey? Just amendment, that's what the amended. Say aye. All those opposed, same sign. Representative Carmichael, you want yours recorded?
No, Mr. Chairman, so long as it was an amendment, I typically don't record my vote. It's the final action on the bill that I want to make sure my constituents know what I did. Thank you, though.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor said aye. All those opposed, same sign. Amendment is passed. Are there any other amendments?
And Mr. Chair, again, with this one, typically as revisers, we will make sure that you get a constitutional title, but again, with this amendment, I would request some leeway to make the title conform with what this amendment is doing.
Anybody have any questions for the reviser about changing the title? Seeing none? That would be fine, Nick.
Thank you.
No other further discussion on this? All those in favor of passing HB or Senate Bill 24 out favorably for passage, say aye.
Aye.
And is that, all those opposed, same sign? As amended, yes. Motion, Senate Bill 24 passed out. And would you like to state you want your vote recorded, Representative Carmichael?
Yes, I voted affirmatively on the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Representative Mason would like his vote recorded. Anybody else? Is there any other discussion for the committee before we adjourn? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen and ladies. We appreciate all your work today, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Representative Schreiber? Yes, there was a drop in it. Yeah, watch for the agenda, because there was a drop in one of the things that came out today, so. And also, if there's any question about the joint hearing with the Senate on Monday, that has been also counseled, so we will see you Tuesday.